Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Forged Youth Legacy Within. I am lucky enough to be sitting here today with Jon, aka the Basketball Whisperer. I
Mm.
love that name for you. And Jon, you work with the Vancouver Bandits right now as their, what is it, the Director of Mental Performance? Am I correct?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. How long have you been doing that for?
Yeah. So this is my second season working with the team. So we're just in, you know, the third quarter or the fourth quarter, I guess, with the
Yep.
last few games. We're first in the league, and yeah, like I think it's an unbelievable organization. I think Kyle Julius has brought in some really special players, and we're aligned with what we believe in regarding mental performance. So that always helps when I have buy-in from the coach, and then all the players feel that. And then so we've just been building. Kyle trusts me, and in this second season, I feel like I've been able to do more,
Yeah.
and I'm really excited to share some of those things on your podcast today.
Yeah, yeah. And I love that like right away you started out of the gate with a really important piece, I believe, when it comes to mental performance. And that is the buy-in from the sorry, the computer froze. Edit. Uh that is the importance of the buy-in from the players and the coach, that mental performance and like mindset training and all that is actually a really vital part of sport. Like how
Mhm.
yeah, like how do we like, because I believe too that mental performance is it's kind of starting now to become a known thing. Hey, like a few years ago it wasn't really talked about a whole lot, I don't think. So how do we start to get coaches of these youth elite athletes and parents to be able to acknowledge the importance of mental training as alongside skills training?
Yeah, it's one of those things that I feel you have to have direct experience with to really believe in it. Like our coach's story is when he was in college, he was playing Division 1 basketball, and either when he came back to Canada, he ended up seeing a sports psychologist, and he had trouble with anger and frustration, and he was really able to work with that and
Mm,
channel it so where he could actually elevate his game. So when I work with athletes or when I have, people that are interested, I'll show them some very simple things where they immediately start to see and feel the connections of, hey man, this makes sense. Like I could use this in basketball. I think
mm,
sometimes when people look at sports psychology, it stays very clinical. Like when I was coaching professional basketball in Italy, we were doing meditation sessions after the practice. So like post practice, we would sit down, in the sun and do, being able to regulate and work with the breath. And we would do that pretty much every practice. And I remember a few of the athletes, and some of the athletes really enjoyed it and felt like they were navigating stress and they were able to detach and move on. And that was really beneficial for them. But at the same time, we had athletes that said, well, this is great, but how does this actually apply to basketball? Like when I'm actually in the game, I need something when I'm in the game because this is what I'm experiencing. So that to me has been my journey the last 5 years. Like when I started, I was very technical, tactical, all the X and O's,
mhm.
and now it's really saying, wow, like breathing. Like I've struggled with breathing my whole life. I had asthma, I had panic attacks. I had a lot of shame. I thought something was wrong with me. And
Mhm.
then once I learned how to breathe and regulate my nervous system, everything changed. I'm a better student, in school. I'm more focused. I can really sit with stuff and work with it. Social settings, I can actually approach people and have conversations. But yeah, most of my, early part of my life, it was really challenging to do that. And until I unlocked my breath, then
Mm.
I could step into my greatness, who I really am, instead of, this tight, hesitant, anxious kid that I was.
Yeah. That's, pardon me, that's so powerful because right now, listening to this podcast, there are those kids and they're listening and they as you're talking about that tight-chested and being nervous and those panic like all that, they're going, hey, that's me, right? And so, what was maybe one specific tool that you used? You talk about breath work. Was there a certain breathing pattern that you used, or?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the first things that you want to do when you're working with the breath, in my opinion, it's learning just to breathe at rest. Because if you're dysfunctional at rest, in terms of your breathing, like you're in your chest, you're tight, you're doing a lot of mouth breathing, that is going to be just magnified. That's going to be turned up when you're actually competing and performing. So the first thing, if you're listening, what I would do is, you take your right hand and you can put it just on your chest, and then you can take your left hand and put it on your belly, your diaphragm. So your diaphragm is located just underneath your ribs here. So you have both hands on your body. And what I do with athletes is I say, okay, close your eyes. And now what I'd like you to do is bring a snapshot into your mind of a game this season, let's say, where you were really struggling, you were hesitating, you were unsure of yourself, maybe you froze up in the game a bit. And what I'd like you to do now is just start to notice where you're breathing from.
I'm noticing it in my chest. I'm doing this exercise just for
Yeah,
everybody who's listening. I'm doing it as John is explaining it, and I'm thinking about a time when I froze up in a game and I'm feeling it like all tight in my chest.
absolutely. And so that's great. So then what you do is you close your eyes again and now bring in a moment where you were sure of yourself, where you were decisive, where you were leading, where you were engaged with your teammates, where basketball or volleyball or whatever sport you're playing was fun for you. Really fun. It was a fun game to play.
Hmm.
The joy.
I feel it like deeper, and I felt my muscles relax and like my shoulders go back even.
That's it. So that's the practice is, just starting to be aware of where you're breathing from in those moments. And the thing is, if let's say you're in your game, the next game you have, and your breath does get tight, it's not, people think, oh, it's bad. I'm going to play bad because I'm not breathing properly. And this is happening. That's just story, that's fear. But if you can sit with it and recognize, oh, this is a signal, my breathing's a little bit tight. My shoulders are really tight. My face is really hot. My neck, back of my neck's hot. Maybe I'm even shaking and trembling a bit. All that's all signals. So
Mm.
the key with that is to be able just to notice it. Oh wow, this is happening. It's not good or bad. This is part of my experience. And from that place, then I can start to regulate my nervous system. I think a lot of times what happens is as I start to teach these tools, we talk about regulating your nervous system, coming back to your center, coming back to your calm. You start to feel uncomfortable. And then immediately we have this reaction that, oh, I got to come back to my center. I got to come back. You're just reinforcing, the fear, the anxiety. So
Mm.
just to be able to notice it first. And then once
Mhm.
you can notice and be very gentle with how you transition into regulating with, whether it's a breath pattern or whatever works for you, whatever that sweet spot is, that sweet tool that always helps you come back. That's what I really want to emphasize, before we get into anything here, that athletes recognize that.
Yeah. And there's a couple of things that I want to touch on that you spoke about. One was while we're talking about this, it is showing that there is such a connection between our mind and our body. And and so when we start to kind of go into the anxious zone or the self-doubt or whatever kind of we're talking about in our own head, all of a sudden our muscles, we talked about getting tight, our shoulders are getting tight, our chest is getting tight, and our breathing is getting shallow. All of these are physical responses to a thought in our mind. And so, how are we supposed to go and play to the best of our ability if our muscles are all tight and we're not getting a full lung capacity of breath in our body? So that was like
Mhm.
one of the key points. And and then the other one was just the being aware of it, because how are we supposed to do something about anything if we don't actually know it's happening to begin with? So it seems so small and obvious. However, it isn't. It is a huge piece. It's just to be aware of like, what are we feeling? And I love that you said it wasn't good or bad. It just is.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and when you're like I was doing it today, every time you breathe out, you're releasing CO2. And what I've been working on, and I think again, this is a small tool that athletes can use, is really even just walking around, or if you're playing video games or whatever you're doing, seeing if you can breathe out a little bit slower.
Mm,
Because the more you can breathe, if you can breathe
mm,
out slower and hold on to some of that CO2, that's actually going to help you calm down. A
mm,
lot of times when people get into, the panic, they're just blowing out too much CO2, and it's like it's very tricky because you feel like, oh, this is going to help me get back if I breathe out faster. But if I can start to breathe out slower, it's going to feel uncomfortable. Like
mm,
it's almost feeling like, man, it feels like I'm slightly suffocating when you first start training it. Like, oh, this is uncomfortable. This is different. And that's what I was saying before is that if I immediately associate that feeling to, oh, this is bad, now I'm going to play bad, then you just get caught, and now you're going to spiral. So it's important, even how we're breathing. Like I'm just noticing, oh, what's happening? What's shifting? And can I slow myself down enough to experience that, to disrupt this pattern, like this behavior of me getting into panic and the anxiousness. It's like
yeah.
you are empowered. Like you can really impact your situation, by just taking a few moments for yourself.
Yeah. And that's the power of being curious. Like that's what I'm hearing from you, right? Like when you're feeling all these things and your body is responding to what's going on in your head and all of that, rather than deciding that it means something, how about we bring in this like being curious? Well, what does this mean? Or, why am I thinking about this? How can I gain my power back and get back in control? When we bring in that piece about being curious, all of a sudden, um, I feel like things aren't so scary. Does that make sense?
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. It's it when you are obsessing about a result, when you're saying I'm right, I'm right, I know I'm right, and you're so fixated on that, that's showing that you're in the red zone,
Mm,
that you're starting to get a little bit dysregulated. Um, so that's the game, is that's one of the signals. If your mind is going racy, if it's starting to fixate on thought, one of the things that we talk to our athletes a lot about is just even saying it out loud, that I'm thinking, or I'm being reactive right now. And it has nothing to do with my teammates or my coaches. A lot of times when we're feeling this anxiousness, if you haven't trained your mind, you pass off that anxiety pretty quick to people around you. Like, it's my coach. He's the one. He's the reason why I'm not succeeding. Instead of saying, you know what, I'm being reactive right now. This is thinking. And then once I can do that, I can come back to grounding. I can feel my feet, my shoes. I can wiggle my toes. I can feel the softness of the material of my clothing on my body. I can notice the breeze, the coolness of the air in my skin. I can notice the warmth of my hands. That that is And if it's too much, like the other thing I say to athletes too, if you really need to disrupt your pattern, you can take ice and you can put it at the back of your neck, and that's another good way that you can ground and
Right.
really disrupt the pattern. Like if I can get into some of those sensations when it's just too much, like it just seems like, oh man, like no matter what I do, I slow down my breath, it's still not working. The ice can be really good on the back of the neck when you're caught and you're in that panic, instead of being, as you're saying, being curious and being having that perspective to zoom out,
Hmm.
you know.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I didn't think about the ice trick. And it's interesting. I know about the ice trick in form of like therapy. I've got my counseling degree and I've been a therapist and all that, and I've used that with clients in that way, but I for some reason haven't shifted it over to sports, but that makes so much sense. Of course it's going to work both ways. It's about and and I love that you everything you said was a sense. It was like feeling, hearing, because that brings you back to the present moment. And I want to ask you, do you have to be in a positive mindset and in a positive place in order to play well?
Mm.
Or are you able to still play to the best of your abilities in a neutral place? Or do you have to be positive?
Yeah, I really like that word neutral, or neutrality. Like I remember, I can't remember the quarterback of the Seattle in the NFL. His guy, he talked about this quite a bit with self-talk. I if I'm in reverse, when I'm driving a car, I'm in reverse. How do I get back into drive? I need to put it into neutral. And then once I can put it
Mhm.
into neutral, then I can get into drive. So the idea is, if you're feeling like, man, I'm negativity, I'm being really reactive, I'm caught in it. A lot of people just try to jump up to positivity. Like someone will come over and say, "Hey man, you got it. Like you're a great player." And when you're in that negativity, it's like, man, I don't believe you. That's not true. And then that almost reinforces the negativity. So
Mhm.
you get to a neutral statement like, I can handle this.
Mhm.
As challenging as this is, I can handle this. And I think if you can get to neutrality, then that's your foundation to really, shoot up to being able to share that energy and be positive and lift other people up. So, with our pros, like we had one player the other day that was really, really struggling, and the goal wasn't to go 180 and get to positive and being able to be a leader. The first person that you have to lead is you have to lead yourself,
Yeah.
right? And that's what we're talking about when we say get to neutral.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yep.
I work with elite youth athletes and they come through a program with me and we do a lot of talking about that because there is this idea that you have to be positive and then they have so much pressure on themselves to be positive, but they're not feeling positive. They're overwhelmed and they're stressed and they're this. And so to go right from exactly what you said, right? Reverse to forward or, red to green kind of a thing without anything in between, it is a very hard thing for them. As it should be. It's hard for all of us. We can't just all of a sudden be in a terrible space and be like, okay, I'm fine now and I'm awesome and totally believe it. And so we work really hard at I rock like the 5 to 1, which is exactly kind of what you did. What do you see around you? What do you hear? What do you taste even? What do you smell? And because that just brings you back to a neutral place, which just it is what it is, things that just are. And then from there, your body reacts to that as well. If you're in a neutral place, your muscles aren't tight and your breathing's not short. But if you're in that red space, that negative space, it is, right? And so just being, I think that that's an important piece. I've been watching, okay, on Netflix, there's a show called Break Point, I think it's called, and it's about tennis. And it's about all these
Mm.
pro tennis players, and it follows them around. And this one woman was in this like high stakes competition playing, and she's losing her like she's losing it, like she's getting so angry, she's hitting like And her coach is on the side, like, just be positive, it's okay. And in my head, I'm like, oh my God, stop telling her to be positive. She's not going to be positive right now. Can we, as coaches, stop just trying to like force feed positivity to our athletes rather than just bringing them to a place where they can just breathe?
Absolutely. And I think that's what the best coaches do is they can recognize that someone is dysregulated. And then if I'm able to come in and slow myself down and
Hmm.
recognize what's happening for that athlete, then something called co-regulation is happening. They can feel how grounded I am, even if the athlete's really struggling and like, oh man, coach is going to be pissed at me. And then you come over with a very calming energy. You're able to slow, you're soften your tone and slow yourself down. Man, that person now can feel that in their own nervous system and bounce back. But,
Hmm.
so many times you see it, coaches are flipping their own lids
Yeah.
and now, that anxiety has just been being thrown around from teammate to teammate. And I think it's a
Yeah.
lot of times why not coaches, teams choke,
Yes.
because it's just like, man, we don't have one person on our team right now that can ground themselves
Hmm.
and focus on what matters.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And it's like energy is contagious. Completely. So when I'm trying to think, like when athletes get themselves into high pressure situations, how can they not freeze? Because there's a lot of athletes who are just friggin' amazing in practice. Like they
mm,
hit all the shots, they are making all their serves, they are, whatever that sport is, they are super confident in practice. And then all of a sudden, a game comes, a competition comes, or they got to take the game-winning shot, whatever that is, and they just totally freeze. Where does that come from, and how can we start to move through that?
yeah, I think the first thing is if you're an athlete that's freezing right now, as we've been talking about, it's not bad. Like the moment you can surrender to, hey, this is just part of my experience. I've frozen up a little bit in the past in my last game. That's where you start. And then the next place is I look at how the athlete's actually training. Are they experiencing some of that tension, um, even some fear, when they're working out, like trying something new, doing something that they haven't done before, and then being able to, again, feel what's happening in the body. And then from that place, there's a concept called pendulation. You can pendulate into the stress and then pendulate into calm. And the more that you can go in and out of those places, you're training your brain that you can experience fear and everything's going to be okay coming on the other side of it. So
Hmm.
that that's one place I'd start is going into practice and putting yourself in environments that are challenging, feeling what's happening in the body, practicing your ability to read state. And then when you get into the game, just keeping it really simple. Like when we talk to our athletes, like we have specific routines that they use when they sub into the game. So, am I ready to play? Because a lot of athletes don't really understand the difference between preparedness and readiness. Preparedness is all the video that you watch, all the workouts that you do, um, you know, the weightlifting, the nutrition, the sleep. But readiness is in the moment. Do I feel ready to take this on? And that is something that a lot of people don't really work on. So for our athletes, we give them routines that they use, even as they're running onto the floor. Like we talk about when you get your name called, sprint to the table. Sprint to the table. That's a form of activation. When you get to the table, jumps, jumping, mini jumps, maybe even some knee tucks. The next thing is we talk about powerful inhale, and then out the mouth. Um, Once they do that, they have one focus. So whatever it is, I'm gonna, chase down a loose ball. just keep it really simple. And then from that place, I'm in a place of readiness that if I do get an opportunity to shoot the ball, I will shoot the ball.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, one thing, I just got to move my car really quick. People are giving me shit for parking where I'm parking.
Okay,
So
no
I
worries.
gotta just gonna go down the street here. I didn't realize. I didn't think school was happening. It's July and there's all these
It's
people at
not
school.
happening. What? Oh, maybe they're doing like summer camps or something like that.
That must be uh that must be the game. But yeah, I got all these people saying you can't park here. I'm like, all right, okay. See if I can just find a shady spot.
Did you live in BC before you took this job?
No, I moved here for the Bandits. So I moved my
Nice.
business, I moved everything over here.
Oh,
Yeah.
good. Taking risks. Love it.
Yeah, it was like one of those things that I was just working with. Like in my home city, our market's pretty small. I just felt there was a little bit of resistance for people really diving into mental performance. Like I think generally it's a blue collar city where I'm from, like Winnipeg. And
Oh,
I grew up in different, different areas. Like there were some rougher parts, like gangs and all that kind of stuff.
yeah.
And you know, it just has always seemed like mental performance, especially in my hometown, is just an extra thing.
Hmm.
And I think now, because I'm in a bigger market, there are still people in BC that believe that, oh yeah, it's just a bonus thing. It's not.
Yeah.
But I'm seeing far more people in BC. I don't know. There's probably multiple variables, but people really buying in, saying, "Man, okay, let's do it. Let's jump in. Let's go in,
Yeah.
and let's." Not only that, but they see like my experience with basketball and saying, "Hey, this is different. Like we haven't trained like this before, or we've been in the gym, as you were saying before. We've been training for 10 years, and we're not getting any better."
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Totally.
anyway, we
Are
can.
you set up?
I'm ready for you. Yeah.
Okay, here
Can
we
you hear
go.
any background noise or anything?
No, I don't, not that I can hear right now. And Zoom's pretty good for canceling it out. So
Muting. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so in that piece there, you mentioned routine and you mentioned focusing on one thing. And I think those are both, we should dive into both of those a little bit deeper. The importance of routine. Why is that important?
Well, I think every player and every parent, when they're watching their kids, talks about consistency. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I want to perform at a consistent level. I want to score 15 points a game or, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And okay, if you want to be consistent there, let's first be consistent with the things that you can really impact and control.
Mm.
So when we were talking about readiness, like your coach may only play you a few minutes a game. Um, you may be playing with some difficult teammates that aren't moving the ball and being a little bit sticky with it. It just may be a bad fit, whatever the reason is. But you can impact readiness every single game, every single time you sub in. And it only takes like 10 seconds, 15 seconds to check in with your body. I think our best players, like talk about Mitch Creek. Mitch Creek played in the NBA. I think he's the MVP of our league. And, he's like the most open and honest dude about it. He checks in with his body, he checks in with what's happening probably 15, 20 times a game,
Yeah.
and then he's able then to shift back into performance, but it's not just always being intense and focused. He's able to zoom out and then zoom in, zoom out and zoom in, and he's really consistent with that. So
Mm-hmm.
if you're consistent with these routines, these concepts, naturally the outcome will take care of itself. And that's not me just talking. That's working with thousands of athletes at all levels.
Yeah.
people that have had breakthroughs with their game. And that's why I believe in mental performance. That's why I do what I do, because I've seen it happen again and again.
Yeah. And I agree with that 100%. I I work a lot with swimmers, and we with each swimmer, we come up with a pre-performance routine, so that before every race, half an hour before every race, they start to get themselves into doing the same routine, so that, what does their warm up look like? What does their stretches look like? When are they drinking water? Are they wearing their parka? Like whatever that looks like, so that their body starts to and brain starts to go, okay, I know that the race is coming up soon. And just, yeah, that key consistency, and that it is controllable. How, like, can we control the outcome of the competition in any way? No, but we can control how I love that, how ready we are. What did we do beforehand in order to show up and do our best? And I usually point out, when we talk about these pre-performance routines, I point out basketball players, because I find that basketball players, before their um
The tip
free
off.
throw. Yeah,
Oh, free
yeah,
throw. Yeah.
and that too, right?
Yeah.
Like, you can see them, physically see them doing a specific thing that is like a split second or two, or they bounce the ball, spin it a certain time, whatever, right? And
Mhm.
that is getting them prepared. It's within their control to follow through in the way that they know how. And yeah, no, I love that. It's vital, I think. Yeah. And then the second piece was the focusing on one thing. Why one thing, John?
Well, I think more than ever, it's information overload.
Yeah.
Like we're getting so hooked on our devices. Um, we're comparing ourselves to other people. We have people telling us who to be, how to live, how to play. So you have all of this stuff around you, all this information, all these people. And I think the best in the world, what they do is they keep it simple and they
Hmm.
focus on one thing at a time. Um, because you just get to a point, it's like, what's your threshold, right? Like, even as a coach, I used to just load players up. We'd have a 10-page scouting report. It's like, how
Mm,
does that make any sense? Like, what's the retention?
yeah.
Like when you retention meaning what are you retaining when you step into the game? And so I think for athletes here, there's all these things that you could focus on, but the mindfulness of it is being aware of those things and then shifting your attention to those things. And you can have cues, right? Like people use a lot of self-talk. You could use self-talk, for
Mhm.
example, to remind yourself of what you're supposed to be doing. Every time you come back to your center, every time you come back to the task, every time you come back to the focus, that's training your mental toughness. That's training your resilience. That's the mindfulness of the game. That's what we call meditation. Every time I go away from my center, I can bring myself back. And I have a method or a practice that helps me do that. And for every single athlete, it's going to look a little bit different. But,
Yeah.
as you get to know yourself, as you develop your self-awareness, you recognize you can strip away all the stuff. And that's why when athletes work with me and we have their player development plan, we call it the MIT. The MIT stands for most important thing. There's all these things, there's 15 different things that you could focus on. Okay, what really matters to you and what's going to impact winning? What does your coach want from you? And can we, with all this stuff, put, one sentence or one phrase or one line that is going to really impact all of these areas.
Hmm.
It's like I always pronounce this wrong. Is it called the Pareto principle? Is that how you say it?
I think so.
Yeah, someone said it the other day a different way, but the Pareto principle is that 20% of your inputs get you 80% of your outputs, and that's the strategy. It's like, what's that one thing? If I just did this one thing, it would impact 80% of my situation, 80% of my performance on the court.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's that quote too, where it says, what, if you focus on everything, you focus on nothing, I think is the
Mm.
quote, right? And I would love to hear your opinion on this. With my athletes, what we do is we go, okay, what is the one thing that you are a total beast at, that you are totally confident in, and that you know that when you do that to the best of your abilities and you trust that you are, following through on that,
Mm.
that it does domino effect to the rest of your play and it makes an impact. And then so they choose that one thing. And a lot of times the first thing they choose is something that they aren't actually beast mode at. They're not super confident in. It's something that they've been working on.
Mm.
And then I go ahead and I explain that, in competition, we're not focusing on the things that we need to get better at. We want to be focusing on the one thing that we are actually, it's our strength.
Yeah.
Practice is for focusing on our weaknesses and the things we need to grow in. But when we get to competition, we don't want that head game of the anxiety of I need to get better or I need to do this differently or that's for practice. In competition, it's the one thing that you are super solid at. What do you think about that?
That makes a lot of sense. I like that prompt for athletes. I think it's the game. It's you're just constantly shaping your focus, but how do you shape your focus? You know who you are, you know what your strengths are, and I think having people like yourself, people like myself asking these kind of questions helps you start to understand,
Mm-hmm.
who you are as a player. If um, you don't have that perspective, and then you get zoomed in or fixated on sometimes the stuff that doesn't help you.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really valuable prompt to consider if you're an athlete listening, asking yourself that question.
Yeah. Yeah. So then where does confidence come from as an athlete and how do we show up with it more?
Where does confidence come from? It's a good question. Confidence. Where does confidence come from? Confidence comes from, in my opinion, I think it's the present moment. That's where it comes from. Leaning
Mm,
into what is, what's actually happening, shifting my attention, bringing your attention back to, the here and now. I think is the game. I think the more present, the people that have been most confident that I've been around have just been extremely present.
mm,
Like that
yeah.
that to me is, and I'm not just talking about athletes, I'm talking about, you know, uh actors, people, even people when you go to a restaurant, they're serving you.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think they're just really, really present with what they're doing. And at the same time, they're human. Like it they're vulnerable. Like they put themselves out there and they try something and they're okay with it. It may not work out,
Yeah.
and at the same time knowing that most of this stuff is out of my hands completely.
Mm-hmm.
As much as I want it to be a certain way, you can't you can't control those things. Like people talk about playing in the NBA, and I love that for people. Anytime anybody tells me that, we've had guys on our own team that tell me I want to play in the NBA, that's my goal. And a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people their whole lives have said it's impossible. Like for you to play in the NBA, it's impossible. Like there's no way. But I'll always say, hey, I'm with it. I'm with it. And I believe in this and I believe in your process. But what we come back to is the process. That's what we
Yes.
come back to. And if we can put a plan together, and we can lean into that, then I think, things can happen. And I think when you have that structure, going back to what I was saying, it's that allows you to be present. That's
Mm,
all the preparation, all the stuff that you've put in. You have a vision, you know what you're aiming at, you know what your focus is.
Yeah.
Now I go out, the ball goes up in the air, and I'm just doing my thing. As you're talking about, I'm not worried about trying to get better or trying to do the next thing. It's like, all right, I'm here,
Yeah.
and I'm going to allow myself to make the mistakes. I'm going to allow myself to struggle when I'm struggling. And then
Yeah.
if I can do that, then I can bounce out of it. I can rebound pretty fast. So
Yeah.
that's a long-winded answer, but I think there are things there that you can pick out, because if you're an athlete here listening, it's the same idea. Like, don't just believe me, don't just believe us. You have to figure out what confidence is for you. You're designing your own mental frameworks for these things, and by listening to this podcast, by having the conversations, you're determining who you are in this world.
Yeah.
And from that place, I think that's what leads to someone that's confident.
I love that. It was not long-winded. It was perfect.
Jumping all over this. We made it.
We made it. Oh my gosh. John, we are coming to like close, but I want to ask you, like, is there anything that you think is important that we haven't talked about yet that you wanna share?
Yeah, what I would say to finish the podcast is focusing on what we started with the breath. I really believe in the breath, and I feel like it's something that is really easy to gloss over. But I've seen again and again athletes that start to develop breath awareness, start to realize what's happening in the body. That's going to allow you the space to shift.
Hmm.
Now I can shift and I can continue to reinforce who I really am. I can continue to bring out the real me.
Hmm.
So I think that's where we want to start with this whole thing. So if there was homework or if there was something here,
Yeah.
just start to be aware of your breath. See if you can notice your breath in moments of relaxation, in moments of there's some tension, and I can recognize people around me starting to get anxious and trying to pass that on to me, and then me having these energetic boundaries and being able to be grounded and feel into my body. That to me is where you start with this whole conversation.
Hmm. I love that. I love that we started the conversation with it and we're ending the conversation with it. It's true though. It's so powerful. Thank you, John, so much for taking time to be with us today. And I just want to acknowledge the work that you're doing and who you are because it's important. It's so important for these athletes, but not only just them as athletes, but all of these skills that you're teaching and coaching these guys, like they're transferable to life and they're things that really lead to being empowered and confident in who you are as a person. And like we said, it's contagious. So, you're teaching these athletes, and these athletes are learning and shifting and growing, and then they're teaching their just by being, their friends and their family and all that. So it really is a tidal wave. You're making impact and you're making moves. So thank you for putting in the work to learn it yourself and then, learn, do, teach, right? So good job. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we'll have you on again. And until next time, everybody, train your mind, build your grit, and forge your legacy.